The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning in May 1918, and it brought Helena Prescott to her knees right there on the wooden floor of the Boston orphanage where she had worked for 3 years. Her younger brother Thomas, barely 19 and full of dreams about serving his country, had fallen somewhere in France, his body lost to the muddy trenches that swallowed so many young men. The telegram was brief, impersonal, and it changed everything. Helena sat there among the curious children who gathered around her, their small hands patting her shoulders, and she made a decision that would alter the course of her life forever. Within 2 weeks, she had resigned from her position, packed her belongings into a single worn trunk, and purchased a train ticket heading west. The orphanage director, a stern woman named Mrs. Carmichael, had tried to convince her to stay, but Helena could not bear to remain in a city that reminded her of Thomas at every corner. She needed open spaces, clear air, and a purpose that felt bigger than her grief. The government was encouraging citizens to plant victory gardens, to grow their own food and support the war effort. Helena had read about communities out west that desperately needed teachers, nurses, and anyone willing to help build a better future. She decided she would do both, teach children and help them grow food, turn tragedy into something meaningful. The train journey took 5 days, each mile carrying her farther from everything familiar. She traveled through Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, and into the vast stretches of the Midwest before finally reaching Arizona Territory, which had only recently become a state in 1912. Springerville sat in the White Mountains of eastern Arizona, a town that existed because of ranching, timber, and the stubborn determination of people who refused to let the harsh land defeat them. When Helena stepped off the train with her trunk and a carpet bag, the late afternoon sun burned overhead with an intensity that made her Boston skin prickle. The town itself was smaller than she had imagined, a collection of wooden buildings along a wide dirt street. She could see a general store, a church with a white steeple, a saloon, and several other establishments whose purposes she could only guess. Horses and wagons moved along the street, and the few people she saw stared at her with open curiosity. A woman traveling alone was unusual, though not unheard of in these changing times. Helena made her way to the address she had been given through correspondence, a small house on the edge of town that served as both schoolhouse and occasional meeting place for the community. The building was weathered but sturdy, with a covered porch and windows that needed washing. She knocked on the door, and after a moment, it opened to reveal a woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and intelligent eyes. "You must be Miss Prescott," the woman said, her voice warm despite the wariness in her expression. "I am Margaret Porter. We have been corresponding." "Yes, Mrs. Porter, thank you for allowing me to come." Margaret stepped aside to let Helena enter. The interior was simple but clean, with desks arranged in rows and a large chalkboard at the front. Books lined shelves along one wall, and Helena felt a small measure of relief. This was a place where learning happened, where children came to better themselves. "We have 12 children who attend regularly," Margaret explained as she showed Helena around. "Their ages range from 6 to 14. Most come from ranching families, though we have a few whose parents work in town." The school term ended 2 weeks ago for the summer, but the children still need guidance and structure. "And the orphans?" Helena asked, remembering the reason she had specifically chosen Springerville. Margaret's expression grew somber. "We have 7 children without parents currently living in various homes around town. Some lost their families to illness, others to accidents. The community does what it can, but resources are limited. Food especially has become difficult. Everything goes to support the war effort, and what remains costs more than most families can afford. Helena set down her carpetbag and looked at Margaret directly. Then we will teach them to grow their own food. Victory gardens are spreading across the country. Children can learn valuable skills while contributing to their households and the community. Margaret studied her for a long moment. You have experience with farming. My grandmother had a garden in Vermont. I spent summers there as a child. I know enough to teach the basics, and I can learn more. We will figure it out together. A slight smile touched Margaret's lips. You have determination, Miss Prescott. That counts for a great deal out here. Very well. We will spread the word. There is land behind the church that Reverend Matthews has offered for community use. If you can organize the children and get gardens planted, you will have the town's support. That night, Helena stayed in a small room attached to the schoolhouse, lying on a narrow bed and listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the desert settling into darkness. Coyotes called in the distance, and the wind whispered through the pines that grew thick in the mountains surrounding the valley. She thought of Thomas, of his eager face the day he enlisted, and she allowed herself to cry for the last time. Tomorrow she would begin her new purpose. The next morning she walked to the general store to purchase supplies. The store smelled of leather, coffee, and tobacco. Shelves stocked everything from canned goods to saddles, and the proprietor, a balding man named Henry Sullivan, greeted her with polite curiosity. "You are the new teacher from back east," he said, not quite making it a question. "I am Helena Prescott. I will be working with the children this summer, teaching them to plant gardens." Henry nodded slowly. "Victory Gardens. My wife has been reading about those. Sounds like a fine idea, though this land can be contrary. What do you need?" Helena had made a list. "Seeds primarily. Beans, squash, carrots, lettuce. Whatever will grow well here. Also, small tools that children can use. Trowels, perhaps. Watering cans if you have them." Henry moved behind the counter and began pulling items from various shelves. "I can provide most of this. The tools might be harder. Everyone is buying up equipment these days, but I will see what I can gather." "I appreciate that, Mr. Sullivan." As Henry assembled her order, the door opened and a man walked in, bringing with him the smell of horses and leather and open air. Helena glanced over and found herself looking at someone who seemed to embody everything she had imagined about the West. He stood well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a lean, muscular build. His face was tanned and weathered, with a strong jaw and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore a dusty hat, a blue work shirt, and chaps over his trousers. A gun belt hung at his hip, though the holster sat easy, not threatening. He removed his hat as he entered, revealing dark hair that needed cutting. His gaze swept the store and landed on Helena, and for a moment their eyes met. She felt something unexpected, a jolt of awareness that made her breath catch. "Morning, Quinn," Henry called out. "Be with you in a moment." "No hurry," the man said, his voice deep and quiet. He moved to a shelf displaying riding equipment and began examining bridles, but Helena noticed his attention seemed divided. She turned back to Henry, trying to focus on the items spread across the counter. "How much do I owe you?" Henry tallied the cost, and Helena counted out the money from her carefully managed funds. She had enough to last several months if she was frugal, and Margaret had promised a small stipend for her work with the children. As Henry wrapped her purchases, the cowboy approached the counter. Up close, Helena could see he was younger than she had first thought, probably in his late 20s. His face bore the lines of someone who spent his life outdoors, but his eyes held intelligence and something else, a gentleness that contrasted with his rugged appearance. "Excuse me, miss," he said. "I could not help but overhear. You are planning to teach children about gardening. Helena straightened, meeting his gaze directly. Yes, I am Helena Prescott. I will be working with the children of Springerville this summer, particularly the orphans who need additional support. He extended his hand. Quinn Morrison, I work at the Double M Ranch north of town. His handshake was firm but careful, and Helena noticed his hands were calloused, marked by hard work. It is a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Morrison. Quinn is fine. He glanced at the seeds and tools on the counter. This land requires specific knowledge. Not everything that grows back east will thrive here. We are at 7,000 feet elevation, and we get hard freezes even in late spring sometimes. Helena felt a flicker of defensiveness. I am aware that I have much to learn. However, the children need to eat, and teaching them self-sufficiency is valuable regardless of the challenges. Quinn held up a hand. I did not mean to offend. Actually, I was thinking I could help. I have experience with gardening at altitude. My mother kept a large garden at our ranch, and I learned from her. If you would welcome the assistance, I could provide guidance. Helena studied him, trying to determine his sincerity. She had learned to be wary of men who offered help. Often their assistance came with expectations. But something in Quinn's expression seemed genuine, and she needed all the help she could get. That would be appreciated, Mr. Morrison. Quinn, I confess I am operating more on determination than expertise. A slight smile touched his lips, transforming his serious face into something warmer. Determination counts for a lot. When do you plan to start? I am meeting with the children tomorrow afternoon behind the church. Reverend Matthews has provided land for the gardens. Quinn nodded. I will be there. I have the day free. We can assess the soil and make plans. After Helena gathered her purchases and left the store, Quinn remained at the counter, watching through the window as she walked down the street, her posture straight despite the heavy parcels she carried. That is quite a woman, Henry said, his tone knowing. Quinn turned back to the shopkeeper. She seems determined. Her brother was killed in France. She came out here to start over from what Margaret Porter told my wife, wants to do something meaningful. Quinn's expression grew thoughtful. Then she came to the right place. Those orphans need someone who cares. The next afternoon, Quinn arrived at the church early, bringing with him a wagon loaded with tools, several bags of composted manure from the ranch, and his own knowledge accumulated over 28 years of living in this unforgiving, beautiful land. He had told his boss, ranch owner Martin Mackenzie, about the project, and Martin had readily agreed to donate materials and allow Quinn time to help. Anything for those kids, Martin had said, and anything for the war effort. My son is over there fighting. Least we can do is help here at home. Quinn unloaded the wagon and surveyed the land behind the church. It was a decent plot, about half an acre, currently covered in native grasses and sagebrush. The soil would be rocky and alkaline, typical for the area, but workable with proper amendment and care. He walked the perimeter, noting the sun exposure and the proximity to the creek that ran behind the church property. Water access would be crucial. Children began arriving in small groups, accompanied by Margaret Porter and several other women from town. They ranged in age from about 6 to 14, just as Margaret had described. Some were clean and well-dressed. Others showed signs of harder circumstances, with patched clothes and watchful eyes. 7 of them, Quinn knew, were the orphans, living in various households that had taken them in out of charity or obligation. Helena arrived wearing a simple cotton dress with a canvas apron over it, her dark hair pulled back in a practical bun. She carried a basket containing the seeds and tools from the general store, and her face showed both nervousness and determination. "Good afternoon," she called out to the assembled children. "My name is Miss Prescott. Some of you may know me already." This summer, we are going to learn about growing food. Each of you will have your own small garden plot, and together we will create something beautiful and useful. One of the older boys, a gangly youth with suspicious eyes, spoke up. Why should we waste time on gardening? The men are fighting a war. This is children's work. Helena walked closer to him, her expression serious. What is your name, Peter Jenkins? Well, Peter, the men fighting overseas need food. Every vegetable we grow here means more food can be sent to support them. Growing food is war work, just as important as any other. Besides, the skills you learn here will serve you throughout your life. Self-sufficiency is never wasted effort. Quinn stepped forward. She is right. I am Quinn Morrison and I work at the Double M. I have been growing food since I was younger than most of you. It teaches patience, responsibility, and how to work with nature instead of against it. Those are skills a man needs, whether he is ranching, farming, or doing anything else. His words seemed to carry weight with the boys especially, and Peter nodded grudgingly. Helena smiled at the children. Now, let us begin by clearing this land. We need to remove the brush and rocks to prepare the soil for planting. The afternoon passed in a flurry of activity. Quinn showed the children how to clear the brush without damaging the soil structure, how to pile rocks in a way that could later become borders for the garden plots. Helena worked alongside them, her hands quickly becoming dirty and scratched, but she never complained. She laughed at the children's jokes, encouraged the shy ones, and gently corrected those who were careless. Quinn found himself watching her more than he should. There was something about the way she interacted with the children that touched him. She treated even the smallest ones with respect, listening to their ideas and praising their efforts. The orphans especially seemed drawn to her, as if they recognized someone who understood loss. One little girl, no more than 7, approached Helena with a handful of wildflowers. Miss Prescott, can we plant flowers too, or only vegetables? Helena knelt down to the girl's level. What is your name, sweetheart? Emma Cole. My parents died last winter from influenza. Helena's expression softened. Those are beautiful flowers, Emma. I think every garden should have flowers. They feed the bees and butterflies, and they remind us that growing food can also be about creating beauty. We will plant vegetables for eating and flowers for joy. The little girl beamed and ran off to tell her friends. Quinn walked over to where Helena stood. You have a way with them. She looked up at him, wiping sweat from her forehead and leaving a smudge of dirt. I worked at an orphanage in Boston for 3 years. Children who have lost parents need extra patience and love. They need to feel valuable. You clearly provide that. Helena's eyes met his and something passed between them, an understanding, a connection. What about you, Quinn? Why did you offer to help? Surely you have enough work at the ranch. He considered his answer carefully. My mother died when I was 12. Fever took her. My father tried his best, but he did not know how to talk to a grieving boy. I learned to bury my feelings and focus on work. These children deserve better than that. If I can help them learn skills while also showing them that adults can be reliable and kind, then my time is well spent. Helena's expression softened. I am sorry about your mother. Losing a parent that young must have been terribly difficult. It was, but it made me who I am. He cleared his throat, uncomfortable with the emotional territory. We should talk about what to plant. Not everything will work at this elevation. They spent the next hour planning the garden layout. Quinn explained that beans, peas, lettuce, radishes, and root vegetables like carrots and beets would do well. Squash could work if they planted after the last frost danger passed, which was typically early June at this altitude. Tomatoes would struggle unless they started plants indoors first. We will divide the space into individual plots, Helena said, sketching in a notebook. Each child will be responsible for their own section, but we will also have communal areas where we grow food that can be distributed to families in need. That is a good plan. It teaches both independence and community responsibility. Over the following weeks, the garden took shape. Quinn came nearly every afternoon after finishing his morning work at the ranch. Martin had adjusted his schedule, recognizing that Quinn's heart was invested in this project. The children cleared the land, amended the soil with the composted manure Quinn brought, and carefully planted seeds in neat rows. Helena proved to be a quick learner and a natural teacher. She researched everything she could about high-altitude gardening, reading books borrowed from Margaret Porter, and asking questions of anyone with farming experience. She created lessons that combined practical gardening work with academic subjects, having the children measure their plots for mathematics practice, write journals about plant growth, and draw diagrams of how seeds germinated. Quinn found himself looking forward to those afternoons more than anything else in his life. He had always been a solitary person, comfortable with his own company and the quiet of the ranch. But Helena brought something different into his world. She was intelligent and passionate, unafraid to get her hands dirty, and genuinely committed to helping these children. They fell into an easy partnership. Quinn would demonstrate a technique, showing the children how to thin seedlings or identify weeds, and Helena would turn it into a broader lesson about patience and observation. When disputes arose between children over whose turn it was to water or who had the biggest plants, they worked together to find fair solutions. One afternoon in early June, after the children had gone home and they were putting away tools, Helena paused and looked at Quinn. "I want to thank you for all your help. I could not have done this without you." Quinn set down the shovel he had been holding. "You would have managed. You have more determination than anyone I have met. Determination only goes so far. You have provided the knowledge and experience I lacked. More than that, the children respect you. The boys especially respond to your guidance." He stepped closer, suddenly aware of how the late afternoon sun caught in her hair, turning the brown strands golden at the edges. "I have enjoyed this more than I expected. It feels good to be part of something meaningful." Helena met his gaze, and the air between them seemed charged with possibility. "Quinn, I wonder if perhaps you might join me for supper sometime. Nothing fancy, just a meal at the boarding house where I am staying." "I would like to repay your kindness." His heart beat faster. "I would like that, but only if you let me take you to dinner properly at the hotel restaurant. They serve a decent meal and you have been working just as hard as I have. You deserve to be treated well." A blush colored her cheeks. "That is very kind. Yes, I would enjoy that." They arranged to meet on Saturday evening, and Quinn left feeling like the world had suddenly become brighter. He had not courted a woman seriously in years, too focused on his work and too aware that most women found his quiet nature boring. But Helena seemed to appreciate his steadiness, and he was drawn to her strength and compassion. Saturday arrived with Quinn more nervous than he had been in years. He bathed carefully, shaved, and wore his best shirt and trousers. He even convinced himself to visit the barber for a haircut, enduring the man's knowing smile when Quinn mentioned he had a dinner engagement. He called for Helena at 6 o'clock, and when she answered the door, his breath caught. She wore a deep blue dress that brought out the color of her eyes, and her hair was arranged in a softer style than the practical buns she favored during gardening work. She looked beautiful and sophisticated, and Quinn felt suddenly aware of his rough hands and simple upbringing. But Helena smiled at him with genuine warmth. "You look very handsome, Quinn." "You look beautiful," he managed, offering his arm. They walked to the hotel restaurant, making conversation about the gardens and the children. The plants were growing well, with the first radishes already nearly ready to harvest. The children checked their plots every day, excited to see progress. The restaurant was the nicest establishment in Springerville, with white tablecloths and candles on each table. The proprietor, a woman named Mrs. Henderson, seated them by a window overlooking the main street. Quinn ordered steak for both of them, along with potatoes and green beans and coffee to drink. As they waited for their food, Helena looked at him with curiosity. "Tell me more about yourself, Quinn. I feel I have learned about you through watching you work, but I want to hear your story in your own words." Quinn shifted in his seat, uncomfortable with being the focus. "There is not much to tell. I was born at the Double M Ranch. My father was the foreman, and I grew up around cattle and horses. My mother died when I was 12, like I mentioned. My father passed 5 years ago from a heart ailment. Martin McKenzie, the ranch owner, has been good to me. He promoted me to foreman after my father died. You enjoy the work?" "I do. Ranching is hard, but it is honest. You see the results of your efforts. The land and the animals do not care about politics or social standing. They respond to hard work and good stewardship." Helena nodded thoughtfully. "That is similar to teaching in a way. Children respond to genuine care and consistent effort. You cannot fake your way through it. Is that why you became a teacher?" Her expression grew more serious. "I became a teacher because I wanted to help children who had experienced loss. My parents died when I was 17 in a fire. My brother Thomas and I only had each other. He was 4 years younger, and I practically raised him while finishing my own education. When he enlisted, I was terrified but proud. And when he died..." Her voice caught. "I needed to find a way to honor his memory and my parents' memory. Helping orphans seemed like the right path." Quinn reached across the table and gently took her hand. "I am deeply sorry for your losses, Helena, but those children are fortunate to have you. You are making a real difference." She squeezed his hand, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Thank you, and thank you for understanding. Many people tell me I should move on, find a husband, settle into a normal life. They do not understand that this work is not something I am doing until something better comes along. This is my purpose. Anyone who cannot see that is not worth your time," Quinn said firmly. "Your dedication is one of the things I admire most about you." The food arrived, interrupting the moment, but the connection between them had deepened. As they ate, the conversation flowed more easily. Helena told stories about the children, about little Emma's fascination with butterflies, and how Peter Jenkins had gradually softened, taking younger children under his wing and helping them with their plots. Quinn shared stories about the ranch, about a particularly ornery bull who had outsmarted every attempt to corral him, and about the time a spring blizzard had stranded them in the high pastures for 3 days. "You ever want something different?" Helena asked. "Travel, perhaps, or life in a city." Quinn considered this. "I visited Denver once. Too many people, too much noise. I felt like I could not breathe. This land suits me. It is harsh sometimes, but it is honest. As for travel, I would not mind seeing more of the West. The Pacific Ocean, maybe, or the tall trees up in Oregon, but I am content here." "I thought I would miss Boston," Helena admitted. "The culture, the bustle, the ocean, but I find I do not. The space here, the sky that goes on forever, the mountains, it feels like freedom. Like I can breathe fully for the first time in years." Their eyes met across the table, and Quinn felt the truth of what was happening settle into his bones. He was falling in love with this woman. It terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. After dinner, they walked slowly back toward Helena's boarding house. The summer evening was mild, with stars beginning to emerge in the deepening twilight. They talked about everything and nothing, comfortable in each other's presence. At the door to the boarding house, Helena turned to face him. "I had a wonderful evening, Quinn, thank you. So did I. Helena, I would like to see you again, not just at the gardens but like this, properly." She smiled. "I would like that too." Quinn wanted to kiss her but sensed it was too soon. Instead, he took her hand and raised it to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Good night, Helena." "Good night, Quinn." As the summer progressed, Quinn and Helena's relationship deepened alongside the growing gardens. They courted in the old-fashioned sense, with walks after church on Sundays, dinners at the hotel, and long conversations while working in the gardens. The children noticed, of course, and teased them gently, but there was approval in their eyes. They liked seeing the two people who cared for them finding happiness together. The gardens flourished beyond anyone's expectations. By mid-July, the children were harvesting radishes, lettuce, peas, and green beans. The communal plots produced enough vegetables to distribute to families in need, and Helena organized the older children to make deliveries. The orphans especially took pride in this, feeling for perhaps the first time that they had something valuable to contribute. Emma Cole's plot became known for its flowers. She had planted marigolds, zinnias, and cosmos among her vegetables, creating a riot of color that attracted butterflies and bees. She would sit for hours watching the insects, and Helena encouraged this, teaching her about pollination and the interconnectedness of nature. Peter Jenkins discovered he had a talent for growing large vegetables. His cabbages grew bigger than anyone else's, and his carrot crop was exceptional. Quinn taught him about soil amendments and proper watering, and the boy soaked up the knowledge like a sponge. He began talking about wanting his own farm someday, about growing food to feed people. One afternoon in late July, after the children had left, Quinn and Helena sat on a bench Quinn had built at the edge of the garden. The air was warm, and the smell of earth and growing things surrounded them. "I have been thinking," Helena said softly, "about what happens when summer ends. The school term will begin again, and the children will have less time for the gardens." Quinn had been thinking about the same thing. The gardens will need tending through harvest season. We can work with the children to preserve what they have grown, teach them about canning and storing food for winter. "That is a good idea, but I was thinking about something else too." She turned to face him. "I was thinking about us." His heart beat faster. "What about us?" "Quinn, these past months have been the happiest I have known since before my parents died. You have become incredibly important to me. I need to know if you feel the same way or if I have misunderstood what is happening between us." He took her hands in his. "You have not misunderstood anything. Helena, I am in love with you. I have never felt this way about anyone. You are strong and kind and passionate about making the world better. You challenge me and comfort me and make me want to be a better man." Tears filled her eyes. "I love you too, Quinn. I did not think I would ever feel this way. After Thomas died, I thought my heart was too broken to love someone like this. But you have shown me that healing is possible, that building a new life does not mean forgetting the past." Quinn cupped her face gently with his calloused hands. "May I kiss you, please?" Their first kiss was tender and sweet, full of promise and hope. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "I want to marry you, Helena," Quinn said. "I know it is fast, but I am certain. I want to build a life with you, help you continue this work with the children, make a family of our own someday. Will you consider it?" Helena laughed, a sound of pure joy. "I will more than consider it. Yes, Quinn. Yes, I will marry you." They kissed again, and the garden around them seemed to celebrate, the plants rustling in the breeze and the birds singing in the nearby trees. They announced their engagement the following Sunday after church, and the community responded with enthusiasm. Margaret Porter hugged them both, her eyes damp with happy tears. "I knew from the moment I saw you two together that this would happen. You are perfect for each other." The children were equally excited. Emma declared she would grow flowers for the wedding, and Peter offered to help Quinn build whatever furniture they needed for their home. The sense of family that had formed around the garden project extended to embrace their future together. Quinn and Helena decided to marry in September, after the main harvest was complete. Quinn spoke to Martin Mackenzie about building a small house on ranch property, and Martin readily agreed, even offering to provide materials and help with construction. "You have been loyal to this ranch for your entire life," Martin said. "It is time you had a real home of your own and a family to fill it. I am happy for you, son." The weeks leading up to the wedding were filled with activity. The gardens produced abundantly, and Helena taught the children about preserving food. They canned beans and tomatoes, dried herbs, and stored root vegetables in a cool cellar beneath the church. Each child took home jars of food they had grown themselves, pride evident in their faces. Quinn worked every spare moment on the house, a simple but sturdy structure with 2 bedrooms, a main living area, a kitchen, and a porch facing the mountains. He built it with care, thinking about the life he and Helena would share within its walls. Helena prepared for married life while continuing her work. She had accepted a permanent position teaching in Springerville, and she planned to continue the Victory Garden project the following spring. The war news remained grim, but here in their small corner of Arizona, they were making a difference in their own way. The wedding took place on a perfect September afternoon. The ceremony was held in the church, with Reverend Matthews officiating. Helena wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself, with Emma's flowers in her hair and a bouquet of vegetables and flowers from the garden. Quinn wore a new suit, his hair neatly trimmed, his face showing both nervousness and absolute certainty. The church was packed with townspeople, ranchers, and every single child from the garden project. When Quinn and Helena exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other through whatever life brought, there was not a dry eye in the building. At the reception, held in the space behind the church where the gardens grew, people feasted on food the children had grown. There was music and dancing and laughter. Peter Jenkins gave a surprisingly eloquent speech about how Miss Prescott and Quinn had taught them that family was not just about blood, but about people who showed up and cared. As the sun set and the party continued, Quinn pulled Helena aside to a quiet corner of the garden. "How are you doing, Mrs. Morrison?" She smiled at her new name. "I am perfectly happy, Mr. Morrison. This has been the most wonderful day." "It is just the beginning," he promised, pulling her close. "We have a whole lifetime ahead of us." They moved into their new house the next day, and Helena marveled at everything Quinn had built. The furniture was simple but well crafted, and he had included thoughtful touches, shelves for her books, a large table where they could work on lesson plans or garden projects, windows positioned to catch the morning light. Their married life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Quinn worked at the ranch during the day while Helena taught school. In the evenings, they worked together on planning the next year's gardens, on preparing lessons, on building their life together. Weekends were spent with the children, maintaining the current gardens and preparing the soil for winter. The war ended in November 1918, and the news reached Springerville by telegraph. The town celebrated with a church service and a community dinner. Helena cried as she thought of Thomas and all the other young men who had given their lives. Quinn held her as she grieved again, understanding that some sorrows never fully healed, they just became part of who you were. "He would be proud of you," Quinn said softly. You honored his memory by helping others, by creating life and growth. That is the best tribute anyone could ask for. Winter came to the mountains, bringing snow and cold winds. The gardens slept beneath blankets of white, but the children still came to the Morrison house for lessons. Helena taught them about crop rotation and planning for the next year. Quinn taught them about animal husbandry and the cycles of ranch life. The orphans especially became regular visitors, finding in Quinn and Helena's home the stability and affection they craved. In February 1919, Helena realized she was pregnant. She told Quinn one evening as they sat by the fire, snow falling softly outside their windows. "I am going to have a baby," she said, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." Quinn's face transformed with wonder and joy. "Truly, truly." Sometime in late September, the doctor thinks. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were something precious and fragile. "I am going to be a father. We are going to have a family." "We already have a family," Helena said, thinking of the children who filled their lives. "But yes, we are going to expand it." The news spread through Springerville, and the community rallied around them. Women offered advice and hand-sewn baby clothes. Martin Mackenzie built a beautiful cradle from oak and pine. The children from the gardens were excited, already arguing about who would be the best at helping with the baby. Spring arrived, and it was time to plan again. Helena, her pregnancy beginning to show, worked alongside the children and Quinn to prepare the gardens. They expanded the plots, adding new sections and incorporating lessons learned from the previous year. More families wanted to participate, having seen the success of the first season. Emma Cole, now 8, declared she wanted to be a teacher like Miss Prescott. Peter Jenkins, at 15, was working part-time at a farm outside town, using the skills Quinn had taught him. All the children showed growth not just in their gardening abilities, but in their confidence and sense of purpose. As summer progressed, and Helena's belly grew round with their child, Quinn became increasingly protective. He worried about her working in the heat, about her carrying water buckets, about everything. Helena found it both touching and exasperating. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she told him one afternoon when he tried to take a small bag of seeds from her hands. "I just want you to be safe." "You and the baby are my whole world," she softened, kissing his cheek. "And you are mine. But I need to stay active to keep doing the work I love. I promise I will be careful and ask for help when I need it." They compromised, with Helena focusing more on teaching and planning while Quinn and the older children did the heavier physical work. The arrangement worked well, and the gardens flourished once more. On September 23, 1919, after a labor that lasted through the night and into the next afternoon, Helena gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas Quinn Morrison, honoring Helena's lost brother and ensuring his name lived on. Quinn held his son for the first time with tears streaming down his weathered face. The baby was tiny and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and his mother's nose. "He is beautiful, Helena. You are amazing." Helena, exhausted but radiant, smiled. "We made him together, our son." The children from the gardens visited over the following days, bringing gifts of vegetables and flowers, wanting to meet baby Thomas. Emma brought a drawing she had made of the Morrison family, stick figures standing in a garden with a rainbow overhead. Quinn framed it and hung it in the baby's room. Life continued in its beautiful rhythm. Helena took time away from teaching to care for Thomas, but she continued working with the garden project, now with a baby strapped to her back in the way she had seen some of the Native American women in the area carry their children. Quinn marveled at his wife's strength and capability. She managed motherhood, teaching, and community work with grace and determination. He supported her in every way he could, taking turns walking the baby at night, helping with household chores, and learning to change diapers despite his initial fumbling attempts. As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, he became a fixture at the gardens. The children doted on him, and he learned to walk among the vegetable rows, his chubby hands reaching for tomatoes and beans. By the time he was 2, he could identify different plants and insisted on having his own small plot. The garden project became a permanent fixture in Springerville. What had started as Helena's way to honor her brother's memory and Quinn's desire to help orphans had grown into a community institution. The town built a permanent tool shed, installed a proper irrigation system, and expanded the plots to accommodate more families. Peter Jenkins, now 17 and working full-time as a farmer, credited Quinn and Helena with changing his life. "I was angry and lost before the gardens," he told them one Sunday afternoon. "You gave me purpose and taught me I had value. I will never forget that." Emma Cole, at 10, was still growing flowers among her vegetables and had developed a reputation for her beautiful arrangements. She sold bouquets at the general store, saving money for her education. "I am going to be a teacher like you, Miss Prescott, I mean Mrs. Morrison," she would say. "And I am going to have gardens at my school too." In the spring of 1922, Helena discovered she was pregnant again. Thomas was nearly 3, an energetic little boy who looked like his father and had his mother's determination. The second pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because Helena knew what to expect. On a warm August day, Helena gave birth to a daughter. They named her Rose Margaret Morrison, after Quinn's mother and Margaret Porter, who had become like a mother to Helena. Rose was a calm baby, content to watch the world with wide gray eyes like her father's. Thomas was fascinated by his little sister, wanting to help with everything. The Morrison family felt complete. The years passed in a blur of seasons. The gardens continued, teaching new generations of children about self-sufficiency and community. Thomas and Rose grew up among the vegetables and flowers, learning lessons about hard work, patience, and caring for others. Quinn remained foreman at the Double M Ranch, respected by everyone who worked with him. He had become a pillar of the community, someone people turned to for advice and help. But his greatest joy was always coming home to Helena and their children, to the life they had built together. Helena continued teaching, eventually becoming the school principal. The Victory Garden Project had evolved into a year-round agricultural education program, recognized throughout Arizona as a model for rural education. She wrote articles for educational journals, sharing what they had learned, and other communities replicated their approach. But more than the professional accomplishments, Helena treasured the individual lives they had touched. Many of the original orphans stayed in contact over the years. Peter Jenkins eventually bought his own farm and married a girl from a neighboring town. He and his wife had 3 children and maintained a large garden that supplied half the county. He visited the Morrisons regularly, always saying he wanted his children to know the people who had changed his life. Emma Cole fulfilled her dream of becoming a teacher. She attended normal school in Flagstaff and returned to Springerville to teach alongside Helena. She never married, finding fulfillment in her students and her gardens. She lived in a small house near the Morrisons and became Aunt Emma to Thomas and Rose. As Quinn and Helena grew older, their love deepened. They had weathered storms together, literally and figuratively. Droughts that threatened the gardens, illnesses that scared them, the normal challenges of raising children and maintaining a household. Through it all, they remained partners in the truest sense. One evening in the summer of 1935, Quinn and Helena sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Thomas was 22, working as a teacher at a school in Phoenix. Rose was 18, newly married to a young rancher from a neighboring spread. The house felt quiet without them, but it was a peaceful quiet. "You ever regret it?" Helena asked, her hand in Quinn's. "The life we chose. We could have had more money, more comfort if we had made different choices." Quinn looked at his wife, still beautiful to him despite the gray in her hair and the lines on her face. "I have never regretted a single day. You are my greatest adventure, Helena. You and the life we built together." "I feel the same way. When I came to Springerville, I was broken and lost. You helped me heal. You gave me love and purpose and a family. The gardens were supposed to honor Thomas, but they became so much more. They became a legacy," Quinn said. "Something that will continue long after we are gone." And it did. The Springerville Community Gardens, as they came to be known, continued for generations. A plaque was eventually placed at the entrance, reading, "Founded in 1918 by Helena Prescott Morrison and Quinn Morrison. Here children learn to plant seeds and grow hope." Quinn and Helena lived long, full lives. They became grandparents multiple times over, with Thomas and Rose both having large families. They never stopped working with children, never stopped teaching about the connection between land, food, and community. When Quinn passed away in 1952 at the age of 72, he died peacefully in his sleep with Helena beside him. His last words to her were, "Thank you for the most beautiful life I could have imagined." Helena lived another 3 years, spending her time with family and maintaining a small garden behind her house. She wrote a memoir about the Victory Gardens and the children they had helped, wanting their stories preserved. When she died in 1955, she was buried beside Quinn, and the entire town came to mourn a woman who had given them so much. At her funeral, Emma Cole, now an elderly woman herself, spoke about what Helena and Quinn had meant. "They taught us that love is action, not just words. They showed us that one person or two people working together can change the world in small but profound ways. They planted seeds of vegetables, but more importantly, they planted seeds of hope, of self-worth, of community. And those seeds continue to grow." Thomas Morrison stood at his mother's grave, his own children and grandchildren around him. He thought about his parents' story, how a grieving woman from Boston and a quiet cowboy from Arizona had found each other and created something beautiful. How they had loved not just each other, but an entire community of children who needed them. He thought about the telegram that had brought his mother west, about the loss that had seemed like an ending but had actually been a beginning. He thought about his namesake, the uncle he had never met but whose sacrifice had set in motion events that led to his existence. As the sun set over Springerville that evening, casting long shadows across the community gardens that still flourished, Thomas made a silent promise to honor his parents' legacy, to continue teaching his own children and grandchildren about hard work, community, and the transformative power of love. The gardens continued, season after season, year after year. New children came to learn and grow, new families benefited from the food and the lessons. And though Helena and Quinn were gone, their presence remained in every planted seed, every harvested vegetable, every child who learned that they had value and purpose. Their love story had not been one of grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It had been built on shared work, mutual respect, and a common desire to make their corner of the world better. They had met in a general store on an ordinary day and created an extraordinary life together. In the years that followed, people still told their story. The teacher from back east who had come to help orphans and the cowboy who had joined her. How they had taught children to plant victory gardens during a time of war and uncertainty. how they had fallen in love while teaching others to grow food and hope. Their story became part of Springerville's history, passed down through generations. It was told to schoolchildren learning about their town's past, to young couples planning their futures, to anyone who needed to hear that love and purpose could be found in the most unexpected places. The house Quinn built still stood decades later, occupied by descendants who maintained it with pride. The gardens continued to flourish, expanding and evolving with each generation but never losing sight of their original purpose: to teach self-sufficiency, community, and the connection between humans and the land. Thomas Morrison's son, named Quinn after his grandfather, eventually wrote a book about his grandparents. It became a regional bestseller, inspiring other communities to start similar programs. People visited Springerville from across the country to see the gardens and learn about the couple who had started it all. But beyond the recognition and the legacy, what mattered most was the simple truth at the heart of their story. Two people had found each other at the right moment. They had chosen to build something together, to pour their energy into helping others. And in doing so, they had created a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. The garden still grew every summer, filled with children learning to plant and harvest, to work together and appreciate the fruits of their labor. And if you listened carefully on a quiet evening, when the wind rustled through the rows of corn and beans, you might almost hear the echo of Helena's laughter and Quinn's quiet voice, teaching another generation about seeds and soil and the many ways love can grow. Their story was complete, a full circle from loss to love to legacy. Helena had come to Springerville to escape grief and found purpose. Quinn had offered help and found his soulmate. Together, they had planted seeds that would continue to bear fruit long after they were gone, vegetables for the body and lessons for the soul. In the end, their love story was not just about two people falling in love. It was about how love, when rooted in service and community, can transform lives and create ripples that spread far beyond what anyone might imagine. It was about taking something as simple as a garden and turning it into a symbol of hope, perseverance, and the enduring human capacity for growth and change. The sun set on Springerville countless times after Helena and Quinn were gone, but their light continued to shine through the lives they had touched and the love they had shared. They had taught orphans to plant victory gardens, and in doing so, they had planted seeds of love that would never stop growing. Their story reached its natural conclusion, but the values they embodied and the community they built continued. Every spring when the gardens were planted, every fall when the harvest was gathered, people remembered the teacher and the cowboy who had started it all, who had shown them that the greatest victories are often the quiet ones, achieved through steady work, genuine care, and love that expresses itself in action. Helena and Quinn Morrison had lived well, loved deeply, and left the world better than they found it. Their story was finished, but their legacy would endure as long as people gathered to plant seeds in the good earth and teach children about the miracle of growth. The victory gardens they had begun during a time of war had become gardens of peace, abundance, and enduring love. And that was the perfect ending to a story that had begun with loss and transformed into something beautiful and lasting.